Yemenis are the longest established Muslim community in Britain. They have put down firm roots in several coastal towns and industrial cities across the country. Where their history and contribution to local life has been recognized and celebrated in their adopted home.
المغتربين اليمنيين الشواطئ البريطانية حكايات يرويها الموج والسواحل الممتدة وسفن البخار معبأة بالفحم والبضائع والحكايات. وكانت طلائع الهجرات اليمنية إلى بريطانيا قد وصلت في نهايات القرن التاسع عشر وعملوا في
Yemeni sailors worked in the British Merchant Navy in the engine rooms of steamships, leaving the old colonial port of Aden.
يضخون فيها من عرقهم ووقتهم ودمائهم مع كثير من كتل الحديد وشواظ النار.
But a century and a half later, their ancestral home has been plunged into almost constant turmoil after the revolution of 2011. In April 2015, the violence escalated into a regional conflict. And this unrest is a concern to British Yemenis.
These are my people, and if they haven't got people to represent them in the outside world and help them, there's going to be a lot of people that will starve or die, and we have an obligation as Muslims.
This is the story of Yemenis in the UK, their life as British Arabs today, which dates back to those first sailors to land in major British seaports in the 1800s, in South Wales and in the northeast of England, on the River Tyne, in South Shields, where they continued to arrive well into the 1950s and 60s.
أنا Ali Abdullah من شميري باللواء تعز. وبعدين أنا دخلت بسنة 54 بريطانيا. رحت البحر بسنة 55. اشتغلت في المراكب هذه في السفن هذه اللي في على فحم 3 سنين.
الهجرة الأولى لليمنيين بدأت في 1870 مع افتتاح قناة السويس والبريطانيين موجودين فيها. الهجرة الثانية جاءت في الثلاثينات والهجرة الثالثة جاءت في الخمسينات.
سنة 44 كسبنا باخرة إنجليزية من عدن على أستراليا. جلسنا 2 بها وروحنا على عدن ورجعنا على مصر وروحنا انجلان. وهذيك السفرة اشتغل يعني عجولة يعني فارمين. كانت المراكب يعني كولبونة. كانت شغل يعني صعيب.
حصل متاعب لما يكون في طوفان ولما يكون نتعب كثير بالطوفان. وبعدين تطلع تشتي تنام ما تقدرش تنام تنزل وانت بالثاني مرة وانت ما نمتش ثاني مرة.
Those ships who are actually going to places like India or beyond need seamen who are able to work on these ships in those very hot climates. Generally speaking, British seamen found it actually quite difficult to operate there. And certainly in jobs such as in their engine rooms, where it was very, very hot, almost unbearably hot, they would employ Yemenis to actually work there as firemen and as stokers.
Yemeni seamen first came to South Shields in the 1890s. The community isn't the biggest in the UK, but because sailors continued to land here during the 20th century, it has some of the most recent arrivals.
بس هذا الذي خرج الخبث. هذا اللي خرج الحاجة اللي قد ما أعتقد تستعمل به وتفعل الجديد هنا وبعدين ترجع هذا الزمن تبنده علشان يعمل القوة لحق البخار كله يروح لهناك. أنا أشتغل في المحركات 4 ساعات في الليل و4 ساعات في النهار. بعض أوقات يمكن أسبوع تقيس في البحر، يمكن بعض أوقات تقيس أسبوعين، يمكن بعض أوقات تقيس 5 أيام، ما يستويش.
أنا كنت من الذي فوق، يعني ناخذ الفحم ونرمي له تحت.
أول ما أجيت بريطانيا رحت البحر، طلبت على شغل في البحر وحصلت شغل في أول شركة بي مركب بريتش فينشن. كنا نروح نجيب بترول من الكويت لأولف جرين لندن. اشتغلت في البحر 25 سنة.
تغرب علي الأكل حتى ضكت ساق، تغرب علي. شفت الخبز ثاني مش زي ما الخبز حق بلادنا. الطباخة يقولوا له صانونة مدري ايش يقولوا لها كذا.
اليمنيين كانوا إذا حصلت هذا الشغل أنت مبسوط، أنت تشتغل بهذا الشغل علشان تقوي نفسك وتبعث لحاجة لبلدك ولا أي حاجة ولا شيء. أما غير الشغل هذا إحنا ما عندنا خبرة لشغل ثاني. دخلنا ما عندنا خبرة ولا عندنا تعليم ولا عندنا أي حاجة، بس دخلنا كل واحد يمني يأخذ واحد ويعلمه هذا الشغل.
They weren't earning a great deal of money. In fact, they were paid just 1/3 of their white counterparts. So what they earned was just hand to mouth. From that very meagre earnings that they earned as sailors, most of their salary would have been sent back to support their family in the Yemen. So they lived in very frugal conditions here in the UK.
لكن نصل فيها نتغسل لازم نبعد الفحم من فوقنا وكل حاجة، والثياب هناك مرمية، حالتنا في ما شاء الله.
The earliest Yemeni seamen met racism and segregation in early 20th century northeast England. They were forced to find their own separate accommodation. The one result of this was the way it helped them carve out their own identity for the first time.
The establishment of the Arab-only boarding houses wasn't really the choice of the Yemenis themselves. They were forced into opening up these businesses largely because they were not allowed to board with white indigenous sailors. And the racism that existed in the colonial context was really the fact that Yemenis were seen as, if you like, colonial subjugates, not worthy of living side by side, as it were, with their white sailor peers. So Yemenis were forced to open up their own Arab-only boarding houses.
ما سافرت كثير، يعني قريب 6 سنين. بعدين رجعت يعني فكيت يعني بردن هاوس يعني هنا سنة 55. خلاص يعني توكيت الكافي يعني وبردن هاوس يعني للبحارة يعني للسيمين. وخلاص يعني سيد في البحر.
As part of his new business, Muhammad also offered services like looking after the Yemenis' valuables and sending money back home to their families.
Yemeni settlement began in the UK almost immediately after the port of Aden in South Yemen became a British protectorate in 1839. But the visibility of Yemenis didn't really come to the fore until the end of the 19th century, and Yemeni settlers were subsumed into the wider kind of identity or understanding of Oriental sailors or Lascars. But it was only when Yemenis began to open up their own Arab-only boarding houses in South Shields, Cardiff and Liverpool that anybody really knew here in the UK that Yemenis existed amongst these port cities.
A boarding house was only men inside the boarding house. There was normally 2 big rooms where the people sat, playing cards, drinking tea, drinking Coca-Cola. The room was full of smoke. People would be playing cards, shouting. And I also remember them banging the cards on the tables with their hands, rings on their fingers, and really banging, you know. Quite good, actually. I just always think, you know, when I get older, I'm going to play cards like these men, but unfortunately the boarding houses are no longer in existence.
You know, I'm sitting down eating asid and sort of like having lunch with them at the Saturday in the boarding house, to the extent that there's a table that sort of like is pushed up against the window. So there's about sort of like 7 or 8 of us sitting around the table, you know, with asid, and we're all diving in, you know, and eating this wonderful, wonderful sort of like meal.
The tastes, you know, and smells. I can smell something today and it would bring me back to my childhood. You know, it was very, very intense. Beautiful smells of different things.
And of course there wasn't any spare seats. So one of the guys, Ubaya, he goes outside, lifts up the window at the end of the table and starts eating with us, but through the window. You know, it's scenes like this that sometimes they're just for you. They don't need a photograph.
Unfortunately, my father took ill after he'd done a couple of trips at sea. He had trouble with ulcers. He did that until he retired, and he died 7 years ago. Miss him greatly as well. Allah yarhamu.
Yusuf's late father is buried in the Muslim area of this cemetery in South Shields.
How many people are in this cemetery? How many gravestones are? Not everybody. As you can see gaps. There's not a gravestone for every grave. You know, some people don't believe in gravestones. But you can see how many people are here. This one here is very old. 1937. As you can see, there's war graves here. You know, for instance, there's a guy here called D.W. Ritchie, a fireman and trimmer, again in the Merchant Navy, died the 24th of June 1945, the same date as the other gentleman. But he's, you know, this is the Christian part of the cemetery, and that guy, because he's a Muslim, although it's a Merchant Navy grave, he's buried in the Muslim part of the cemetery.
Yemeni seamen played vital roles in the British Merchant Navy in both world wars of the 20th century.
In those wars, seamen, white seamen working in the Merchant Navy were then mobilized to fight in the war effort. And so Yemeni seamen took their place in the Merchant Navy. And that's very important because these seamen were then plying ships which were going out and providing supplies to the troops all around the world where fighting was actually taking place. And so they were very much a target as far as the Germans were concerned. And a number of these ships were sunk.
Over 3,500 volunteer Yemeni sailors died during the First World War. The Cardiff community alone lost 1,000 men, which is a huge amount for a relatively small community. So questions about loyalty and belonging for that early established Yemeni sailor community in the UK were answered.
Once the war had ended, soldiers were coming back, white soldiers were coming back. They were being demobilized. Once they were demobilized, then they wanted to get back into their civilian jobs. Those jobs obviously had been taken up by Yemenis and other Muslims. So what you find is that there is a degree of tension that is produced as a result of a small number of jobs being there, and the competition that actually took place between those people who were in those jobs at that time and those people who were returning from the wars. And that tension then translated into a certain amount of racism.
The riot that broke out because one Yemeni sailor, wanted to renew his trade union fees and board a ship. And he was stopped by a white trade union leader who objected to the fact that Yemenis were finding work on British ships before white indigenous sailors were. And there was an argument and a fight broke out, and that fight spread across the docklands of the UK.
The race riots in 1919 and 1930 were a big part of local and national history. Northeast writer Peter Mortimer wrote a play about them.
Down Mill Dam in the morning and get some work. I can think that maybe there is a reason for getting up each day, and that England is still England. I am very sorry for you, Mr. Chalm. Sorry. Sorry for me, you, an Arab. Sorry for me. Perhaps we should go, Thelma. It does not feel good here. Please, may I have my copy of the Quran back? You must think I'm stupid, son. Like I don't know what's going on, fighting for me bloody country.
And I come home to find there's no work and the whole bloody place is full of stinking wogs.
600 British Yemenis were rounded up by the government and expatriated back to the Yemen. Now, the irony is that they were as British, at least in terms of their nationality, as their white counterparts. Many of them, of course, were married to English or Welsh wives with mixed-race children. But because of the riots, because of the feeling of the wider society, again, issues were wrapped up in ideas of racism and how colonial subjects, as they were then, were seen in the wider context of British society. It was seen to be right and fitting that those Arabs shouldn't actually be here. They should go back to where they came from.
Enter a key figure in the future life of the Yemeni community in Britain, the merchant and Sufi Muslim Sheikh Abdullah Ali Al-Hakimi.
When Sheikh Al-Hakimi first came to Britain, he settled in South Shields and immediately began to establish a centre for Islamic learning. He managed to convince the community there to club together, and they bought a disused pub. And they turned that pub into a zawiya, an Islamic centre, effectively a mosque or a masjid. Now, in the centre, he established 5 daily prayers in jama'at, in congregation. He established a madrasa for teaching the children, the mixed-race children, the Quran. And more importantly, he established weekly classes and study circles in Arabic and Quranic lessons for the wives, the convert British wives of the Yemeni sailors. Now, this completely transformed the community.
Al-Hakimi then left South Shields and travelled to South Wales, where another significant Yemeni community had grown up around the seaport in Cardiff.
هذا البقعة الذي كانت فيها مسجد النور زمان، مسجد النور الأصلي، وبعدين كسروها لأنها شيبت وعمروا هذا المسجد بثارها مكانها مسجد النور، وعمروا المسجد الأصلي الشيخ عبد الله الحكيمي والقالية اليمنية.
الشيخ الحكيمي قام وفتح باب حوار مخاطبة مع المسلمين وخصوصا مع غير المسلمين في الأماكن في الحكومة وفي أماكن أخرى، ففتح حوار وأصبح الحاجات للمسلمين لديهم أصبح يعني شيء محترمة عند الناس في الحكومة. وأيضا بدأ يدرس النساء الذين هم كانوا غير مسلمين ثم دخلوا الإسلام تزوجوا مع الرجال اليمنيين هنا، فبدأ باعتناء كامل بتربية النساء.
الشيخ عبد الله الحكيمي جاب الطريقة العلوية لليمنيين الذي هنا في كارديف، فكانوا قوي في المذهب هذا، يعني الطريقة العلوية. وهو تعلم عند الشيخ في بستغانم في الجزائر، وبعدين جابها لكارديف، واليمنيين كلهم مشوا بعده.
Sheikh al-Hakimi saw it as his task, being a Yemeni, to come and settle in the UK and to establish religious centres so that he could train and teach Islam to the Yemeni community here.
And at work, there'll be people who, I'm right and you're wrong. You might be superiors or people you have to work with. I'm right and you're always wrong. شأن اليمنيين إن بعض الناس يعني ما عرفوا عنهم شيء، فقاموا هم اليمنيين يخدموا الجالية أيضا ويخدموا الغير المسلمين. نسمع أشياء يعني غريبة أنهم قاموا في أثناء الحرب العالمية الثانية، أنهم قاموا ويجيبوا إعلان عن الطائرات آتية من ألمانيا في يعني اسمها the air ride the noise the horn هكذا يسموها يشغلوها، وفي صوت عشان تنبيه للناس.
Coming up, the challenges facing Yemeni men the longer they stayed in the UK, first finding work when the Navy no longer needed them.
Ships are moving to diesel, so there are fewer jobs as firemen and as stokers. Where do they find these alternative jobs? They have to go inland. They go into places like Sheffield and Birmingham.
And then meeting and marrying British women.
My father said, well, if you insist on going out with him, then you must bring him up for me to inspect him.
These women are British Yemenis, descendants of sailors who landed here in Cardiff, in South Wales in the late 1800s.
I was born here, grew up here. When I was about 8 or 9, then my dad started saying things like, you know, we need to take the children to Yemen, they need to, you know, explore the culture, their identities.
Yemenis are the oldest Muslim community in the UK, and one of the challenges facing them, like many immigrant communities, is how to preserve tradition and cultural identity.
We have some of the girls, they come in to prepare and set up ready for the girls that come in the evening for the youth club. They'll taste the cooking which has taken place during the day, and then they will have a go of making their own. It's a skill which they can carry with them throughout their lives. They'll go to school and they'll learn how to cook, but it'll be British food. So why not have the opportunity to learn how to cook Yemeni food?
Can you all say thank you to Galila for helping you?
Everything's quick from Asda, you get it frozen out of the freezer, but this is like home cooking, it's from the heart, isn't it?
We learn about different cultures, like because we're friends, we should know about different people, and food is part of their culture.
في مدينة كارديف، وهذا الشارع شارع بيوت ستريت. والدي أجا من اليمن في الثلاثينات وأخذ 4 بيوت في البقعة هذا، وفتح يعني مطعم عربية، الهوتيل هنا ومسكن لليمنيين، ومن وراء البيت مسجد. شوف هنا كايرو هوتيل معروف بالشرق الأوسط كله، حتى الله يرحمه جمال عبد الناصر كان يرسل له بطاقة العيد كل سنة. والحكومة بعد ما كسروا البيوت عملوا هذا البوست تذكير للكايرو هوتيل. عندنا هناك في بيوت تاون علشان كان في أجانب كثير، كان ما فيش أي حاجة، ما شو ولا حد يشوف على الثاني، يعني أنت كذا ولا أنت كذا، إلا بس لما نخرج من المنطقة هذا بعدين تحصل الناس يعني يكرهوا الأجانب يعني. ولكن احنا اليمنيين كنا برضو نشوف على أنفسنا وإذا في أي واحد يتعرض معانا نمشي جماعة يعني، فبعدين تعلموا الاحترام، علمناهم الاحترام.
Yemenis who'd arrived in steamships had to adapt to a changing industrial world in the UK.
From the interwar period, the 1930s, ships are moving from being coal-fueled ships to diesel fuel ships. So there are fewer jobs on ships anyway as firemen and as stokers. They're not, doing those sorts of jobs. And once those jobs have gone, then they have to actually find alternative jobs. And where do they find these alternative jobs? They have to go inland to find these alternative jobs. So they go into places like Sheffield and Birmingham and Manchester, and the industries that they actually go into are heavy industries, things like steel, iron.
كل اليمنيين كانوا يعملوا في مصانع، وأغلبية المصانع مش الحديد والصلب، ولكن مصانع هو ما يسموه انجينيرنج، يعني الهندسة أو الشيء الميكانيكي الصغيرة، لكنهم كلهم كانوا بيشتغلوا، ما في أحد كان متقاعد.
كان العمال اليمنيين الموجودين هنا ينظمون أنفسهم إما في اتحاد عمال العرب، وهذا كان اتحاد قومي ناصري، أو ما يسمى برابطة عمال العرب، وكان لها ميول البعثي.
أول اتحاد في 58 وسميناه اتحاد عمال اليمن. كان لنا لقاءات، احتفالات، ندوات، كنا ندعي أي إنسان نستقطبه عنده سياسة ديني إلى آخره، جاي من الخارج من أي مكان من الوطن العربي. كان هذه نشاطتنا. في نفس الوقت أيضا نآزر المظاهرات، كانت تطلع مظاهرة لصالح فلسطين. يعني أنا قلت أول مظاهرة حول القدس لما نحرقوا القدس، فطلعت من هنا بحوالي 20 باص، طلب مني من جامعة الدول العربية، وطلعت 20 كوتش من هنا إلى لندن.
بدأ في الوسط اليمني البريطاني يتشكل مجاميع جديدة متمحورة حول الأسرة ونموها والأطفال والهم المحلي. يعني الأطفال الآن في المدارس لغتهم العربية، انتمائهم الديني الحضاري، هم الأب وكثير بدأ ينشغل بهذا الجانب.
As Yemenis, particularly the men, became more established in Britain, they gradually spoke less and less Arabic. This could sometimes cause family friction, so community leaders acted to address the problem.
في 79 كان عندنا 7 أطفال الذي جاءوا من اليمن أعمارهم من 5 و6 سنوات، فالتحقوا بالمدارس الإنجليزية. كان يدخلوا إلى البيت يتكلموا مع آبائهم بالإنجليزي، والآباء والأمهات ما يفهموا اللغة الإنجليزية. فاقترحت عليهم على أساس فتح مدرسة عربية مسائيا، فصراحة العدد 75. اضطرينا ان احنا نطلب مساعدة من اخواننا المدرسين الطلاب.
يلا. Okay, يلا, let's go because we're running late.
This is Rajih Muflihi. He lives in Sandwell, a modern suburb of Birmingham in the English West Midlands.
What a very important date.
Birmingham was once a hub of the car industry and large-scale manufacturing, and was one of the places where Yemenis moved in numbers when work on the steamships dried up. Muflih is the son of a Yemeni father and a British mother, and works hard locally to maintain a strong sense of community and cultural identity. His son goes to Arabic classes.
Salam. How are you, Kevin? Alhamdulillah. Yeah, make sure your study's good today. All right.
التقينا جميعا في القسم حول معلمتنا نتجاذب الحديث ونعبر عن سعادتنا باستقبال عام جديد يتوج المرحلة الابتدائية. الآن الأطفال يتكلمون، يقول تجمعنا مع بعضنا حول المدرسة. Students got together around the teacher.
These are traditional Yemeni items. One elderly gentleman bought me that rock from. This is from your village, from Yafa. As you can see, we've got a gym here. And the reason that we got a gym is because we felt that the women weren't exercising in an environment where it was user-friendly. So we have, when they take their children to school, they'll come here, close the door and exercise and then go home.
Sandwell is ethnically diverse and suffers from many of the problems common to immigrant communities in the UK today. Some British Yemenis find it hard to get jobs at all, and as a businessman, Muflihi encourages his people to set up their own businesses to survive.
Unfortunately, we're having there is institutional racism at the moment, and the chances of you getting a really good job are remote. So we're trying to empower people to actually start their own businesses.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you? You okay? How's business? Excellent, excellent. Need some other for the madam. Yeah. That's tight. Okay, it's very good.
Rajih's parents met in 1959 and got married in 1961. Mixed marriages were not common at the time in Britain. His mother, Carol, had to bring his father, Saleh, home for her parents to inspect him.
Okay. Who's calling me?
My family didn't know what a Yemeni person was, didn't know what an Arab was. And the only way I could describe him was by saying, well, he wasn't Italian and he wasn't black. He was just in between. And my father said, well, if you insist on going out with him, then you must bring him up for me to inspect him. That was the word he used, inspect him. And my father just put his arm round his shoulder and said, come on, son. And that was it. That was in 1959. We got married in 1961. He got on really well with my family. In fact, we did move in for a little while, didn't we? You know, so we got our own little place. I was sitting on a bus once, and this woman next to me was going on about black, all the colours, swearing like mad. And I turned around and says, you want to watch who you're talking to, love? My husband's Arab. I says, and you're just lucky that I'm not going to hit you one. I was really angry about that, you know. But the more different people have come into the area, the more it's accepted now.
When Yemeni men went in search of work in heavy industry, another destination was the major steel-making city of Sheffield in South Yorkshire.
برنامجكم الأسبوعي بالعربي والذي يقدم لكم من
The Yemeni community is well established here and has its own Arabic language program on local radio.
في انتظار مكالماتكم ومشاركاتكم معنا ومع ضيوفنا لدينا لهذه الليلة.
نقدم برنامج أسبوعي من الساعة 8 إلى الساعة 9 لننقل المعلومة طبعا لكل الدول العربية وبالذات اليمن، لأن نحن نهتم كثير بقضايا اليمنية وبالذات قضية المرأة في بلاد الاغتراب.
أجيتي هنا وجلستي فترة واشتغلتي وأقوى ناس جداد وتعرفتي عليهم، كيف قدرتي تواصلي معهم تعرفيهم على البلد؟
سبحان الله، لما تشوفي العربي قدام العربي يعترف. فهمني كيف؟ ساعة ما تشوفي السلام عليكم هذه تسوي الدنيا ما في ويفرحوا لما يلاقوا واحد يتكلم عربي.
نعم صحيح.
فبدت أكثر بعدين لما توقفت أنا على الشغل الحكومي، فدخلت الشغل في الدور مع الليغالية. فبدأنا نأسس الليغالية، بدأنا الحريم تجي نتكلم مع الرجال، خرجوا الحريم يدرسوا لأنه في كثير أجت. بدأت الحياة تتغير لأنه العرب كانوا قليل، ما كانوش كثير، كانوا كثير رجال من غير نسائهم.
اليمنيون فعلا لم يجدوا حيز كافي في الإعلام هنا في بريطانيا، على الرغم من أنه يتم التطرق إلى تاريخهم هنا وإسهاماتهم في بناء ومشاركتهم في بناء المجتمع وبناء هذا الوطن، لكن بصورة تكاد تكون خجولة.
Nawal Abdullah, like other British Arab women, is making her contribution. After working in social services, she started her own company offering private social care.
I started Inspire mid-2010. The culture, the tradition, I think the way that we get brought up really, our traditions and the fact that you will look after your parents, even though they don't tell you that, but it's something, whether it's innate, it's something within us, or whether it's your duty to do it, yeah, but we do it, we do look after our own. I don't think everybody can do this. Some families aren't going to welcome you. Some families are going to welcome you. There can be dynamics when you have a Yemeni social worker. Especially on the severity of the case. If you're in there and you are in there for the purpose of a serious child protection issue, they are going to be personal. They are going to target you.
Somebody to come in the morning, help me get up, shower, dress, help get my breakfast together, get wudu, get like on Friday make ghusl, and in the evening help me get my evening meal together.
They are going to probably say, well, they don't understand the system. They're black. They don't have this. They don't have their own children. Do you know what I mean? They're gonna pull out a lot of personal stuff about you as a social worker and as an individual, because in essence you are questioning them.
Rajah Muflihi runs an aid and fundraising charity aimed at alleviating poverty and suffering in Yemen.
We knew that there was going to be nearly 10 million people on the verge of starvation in the Yemen because of poverty and because of the war and Al-Qaeda and things like that. And we had a responsibility to our people that we have in Yemen. So it was vital that we got together And this is to look at the results, what we've achieved in the first year, and how we can continue to improve and develop for the future.
We worked on an international advocacy level with some of the big organisations, just naming some: THF, the Humanitarian Forum. We've worked with Islamic Relief, we worked with Mercy Corps, we worked with Oxfam to try, and we brought a group together, thank God, and we were actually one of the main actors in bringing this group together to just advocate the humanitarian situation in Yemen.
It's an organisation that was formed a year ago with reference to getting all the Yemeni communities working together and have a link and responsibility to the people who are less fortunate than us in the Yemen. And this is for us to collectively work together to do fundraising and look at projects that we can help and serve people in the Yemen that, as I highlighted, they're less fortunate than ourselves. So collectively, it was formed, people from Sheffield, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, Halsowin, Sandwell.
I straddled personally many generations of the Yemeni community, as you can see. And whether it's in Sandwell or Birmingham or nationally or wherever. But actually being in a room of young people like yourselves, so confident and so accomplished, is something the Yemeni community has not experienced before.
لا مش إنجليزية. أنا عربية. من نعيش بهذا البلاد مفروض نحاول نجيب العربي والإنجليزي مع بعض. يعني نستفيد من التقاليد حق العرب والإسلام والأسر، ونستفيد من إيش بريطانيا تقدر تعطي لكم. بس المفروض انتم تحاولوا تدهفوا نفوسكم. كمان صلحت رحت الجامعه، تعاركت بالجامعه. It's how you bring it both together and balance them.
ربيناهم طريقة يمنية، يعني مش طريقة إنجليزية، طريقة يمنية. وصعيب يعني هنا الأولاد ترباتهم في هذه البلد، بس الحمد لله طلعوا، يعني الحمد لله ربي استجاب دعائي. يعني ما مش منهم واحد كذا ولا واحد، كلهم الحمد لله.
I think it's vital that we know our heritage, we know our home, and the importance of having a link to our people in the Yemen. And I think it's rare to get people that are wanting to help their own community, not only here, but also in the Yemen. And I just felt that these are my people, and if they haven't got people to represent them in the outside world and help them bring some sort of funding, there's going to be a lot of people that will starve or die, and we have an obligation as Muslims.